What up, y'all? We're talking about DBQs tonight. I don't know how stressed we're feeling about DBQs. I'm gonna probably change this a little bit. Hit me in the chat. Give me a scale 1 through 5. How are you feeling about the DBQ? If you had to do it tomorrow, you know, hopefully you've written several all year and you feel like I know kind of what to expect. 0, that's not good. 3s, 2s, a 10, that's good. All right. That's not bad. It's not bad, y'all. All right, so we're gonna kind of really go through this with like a lot of questions. I'm probably going to be pulling up a Google Doc at some point and just sort of like writing some stuff out. And then the other thing I wanted to share are slides that I used a few weeks ago. AP History, DBQ. So what I'd like you guys to do is really think. We're gonna kind of think through the whole DBQ process here and run through like strategies. But I'm really gonna spend a lot of time answering questions, so that that's really where the bulk of the time will be. Okay. One sec. My computer is frozen. Here we go. All right, so hit me in the question tab where it says ask a question. Think about all those like burning questions you have or specific things that you want to spend time on. You want to really clarify, understand. What are the rubric points that you're stressing out about the most? All right, let me just share my screen. Okay. All right. All right, so there's really just like one big slide that I want to bring up on here. And then, like I said, I'm just going to spend most of my time answering your questions. So I just want to bring up kind of the DBQ rubric up here so we can kind of use this to go through it. This question about whether or not, so grading the SAQs from last night, I haven't gotten to it yet. I'm trying to get to them as fast as I can. I'm doing my best. I'm going to try to do it tomorrow morning. So just be on the lookout for that. Apologies. Okay. All right. I'm just gonna, sorry, I'm having a little technical difficulties. One sec, y'all. Hit me with the questions. Head into the questions tab. Give me your, upvote the questions. Let me know what you want to really focus on. And then give me 1 second. I'm just moving my spots. Okay. All right, just moving around, making it work. I don't know about you guys, but I really like Game of Thrones, and this is what we do on Sunday nights. We have people over and we watch Game of Thrones at the Fiveable house. So, how many of you are going to go straight from this to a Game of Thrones and then back to studying? Me, yeah, literal mood. And then, so I just want to let you guys know I'm doing some practice mini Game of Fives trivia today. And so if you played just a few minutes ago, if you didn't, I'm going to play again around right before Game of Thrones, and then we'll play after. So just want to let you know. All right, let's cut through this. Let's kind of go through the rubrics, okay? So we'll go through the rubrics, and then I'll cut through like how you should strategize your your DBQ. How should you spend the time? What should you do first? So many different pieces. And yes, Arya is the best character, period. Rooting for her. All right, so the first point on the rubric is the thesis. The thing about the thesis is you have to make sure to actually answer the question, right? So you're posing an argument, and you should take a stance on that argument, and really just make sure that you relate it to the question, right? Like, don't kind of twist the words of the question to make it what you want. You need to make it what it's actually asking, right? So let me see here about questions on thesis that you have here. Okay, this is sourcing. I'm going to get through all these questions for sure. And we'll get that one. Looks like not too many thesis points. So let me know in the chat, how do you feel about a thesis point? Give me just like a 0, 1, or 2. So a 2 would be like the best. Just to sort of make it easier. A 2 would be like, I get the thesis point every time. I feel great about it. A 1 would be like, I kind of get it sometimes. And a 0 would be like, I literally never get the thesis point and I don't know why. Okay. All right. So the thing about the thesis point, so it looks like most of you guys are doing pretty good on thesis. The best way to do this is sort of in a way that's like, let me pull up this. Sort of in a way that is, just to kind of show you, this is the structure for it. So you have to make sure to address the prompt. So the most basic way to do that would be blank. A qualifier is like mostly, greatly, intensely. You're describing the thing. You're taking a stance. So, in this case, you could have said like railroads greatly affected the process of empire building. Just by saying greatly, you are taking a stance. And then because would be like blank and blank. However, this is the like more complex version. However, blank. Give a counter argument in your thesis that will set you up to actually get the complexity point. All right. So the way that you end up writing your thesis is by sort of grouping up the documents, right? So some of these questions were around, oh my God, I have so many tabs open. Other mode. Some of these questions were around, like, how do I group the documents? How do you use all the documents? So like, how do you use all the documents is about actually grouping them. And so when you first sit down and you look at the prompt and then you look at the documents that you're given, you're trying to figure out, how can I use these documents to answer this question? Right? In what way can I pit them, with each other, where they're going to sort of, help each other, or can I show that they're against each other? Whatever. And so you're creating groupings, right? And so think about that, like how to correctly create groups. Think of it as almost like little like playlists of documents, right? So you have, like, you're going to argue that railroads greatly affected empire building. So I need 2 ways that they did. You can use like Spice to sort of help you. Which documents would go on like a political playlist? Which documents would have been on the economic playlist? That's kind of the way that I think about it. And so group up the documents. There's a lot of correct ways to do them. No matter what DBQ you get, what documents you get, there's going to be lots of ways to answer the question. And so the only thing that you have to do is just whatever you decide, prove why that works, right? So really just make sure to like that should be the first thing you do within the first 15 minutes of actually opening up your DBQ, is understanding the prompt and figuring out, how am I going to use these documents to support an argument? Okay, and then however you actually group up the documents, that's how you write your thesis. So, railroads, greatly is the qualifier. It's describing how much so greatly affected the process of empire building because, for political, whatever, because blank, and those are going to be 2 of your groups. However, this other group, and then try to make one of your groups a counter argument. That will really help you get complexity. Okay. All right. So let's jump down to context. So remember, the thesis has to be either in your intro or your conclusion. You can get the point in either. You want to make sure to try both in case you miss it in the beginning. The reader will look down to see if you get it in the conclusion. So restate yourself. Don't just copy it. Actually reword the thesis in a little bit of a different way. Your actual intro paragraph should really include context and thesis. You could put them in either order: thesis, context, context, thesis. I think context first makes sense because it's your background information, right? So to jump into context, hit me in the chat. Give me a 0, 1, or 2. How strong do you feel about context? A 2 would be I always get it. I kill it on context. A 1 would be I sometimes get it. And a 0 would be like I seriously have no idea what context is looking for. All right, so you guys definitely seem a little bit more stressed about context rather than thesis. Some of you guys are totally killing it. For those of you that did say a 2, put in the chat some of your strategies. Like, how do you think about it? Or what do you try to write in the context that always seems to work for you? And let me go through some of these questions on context. These are all sourcing, evidence. Okay, so essentially what you want to do with context, looks like none of these questions are context. Whoa. None of these your questions here are about context. Wish I could search this, that'd be nice. Okay, so the thing about context that you want to remember is that it's really like, think about in any, like we're using Game of Thrones. Think about if there were a Game of Thrones, it's just a little thing at the very beginning that just said like previously on Game of Thrones. And then they showed us little snippets about each of the characters' past or past events that happened either last week or maybe 5 seasons ago, but they're going to be useful in remembering right now in this episode. Right. And so they do that in order to like set the stage, because they want you to remember, like if they're bringing a character back that hasn't been around for a while, they want you to remember who that was and what you thought about them. You know, they want you to know what happened last week if there were any cliffhangers. That's really like what it looks like. So for some of you guys, I'm going to read these a little bit. Basically dropping whatever is going on at that time in history around the world, right? So the events leading up to it, it can be, so for world history, we're talking about a lot of time. So, you know, in like Euro and US, it makes sense to think of it as like a chunk of time before, but in world, you can kind of, that there isn't like a definitive amount of time that you should be explaining. You just really need to kind of set it up. And so is there some huge world event that just happened, like a world war, or, you know, fall of empires, or like disease that spread, or trade? Like, what's the general pattern of like some massive event? And that's sort of like how you're going to set it up. Like one of those things can be your context, as long as you then connect it to the prompt. That's the most important piece, is that you're actually like taking your context. If you say World War II just happened, now you need to connect to World War II to this prompt. How does it lead into the specific topic that they brought up? That's the piece where if you're losing context points, you're probably not doing that thing, because it's easy enough to write, you know, 2 sentences about some major event. So let's just do this really quick. Run through for me periods. So DBQ is just going to be on periods really 3 to 6. So run through for me in period 3. So 600 to 1450, what are some of the really big events that happen that are most likely going to be in your context if you have a DBQ about period 3? Like, what are some of those huge things? Yeah, put those in the chat. And I wanted to read one other. Whoop. Yeah, okay, so in period 3, we have Mongols, Islams, right, spread of Islam, some of the empires like the Byzantines. We have the plague, the Crusades, intensification of trade. You know, you had the fall of empires, and now you have a rise of different empires, or at least in Europe, you have sort of, you know, everything is decentralized until you have sort of the reorganization after like feudalism, right? You know, the Tangan songs, these are like massive things. Like if you have a DBQ about period 3, one of these things is going to be in your context, And honestly, I think this is a really good way to study, is if you just like draw this out, take a piece of paper and think of the top 10 events or people, top 10 things from that time period that you can barely understand anything of that time if you aren't looking at those, right? And we're sort of doing that here. And so this is a really good way for you to study, to do like top 10. All right, give me period 4. So 1450 to 1750. What are those major events in period 4 that are going to find their way into your context if you are writing about period 4? Columbian Exchange. Columbian Exchange, global network, those are like the big things. Exploration, gunpowder empires. So always make sure that like if you get a question about period 4 and you're talking about Asia, right, you can totally bring in the Columbian Exchange, but make sure you link it to Asia. Right? You can't just say, and then the world was united. Okay, but how does this affect Asia? How did this affect China? Right? So like silver trade is how you would sort of weave it in. Or the fact that plenty of crops and we're going to China, to Asia, and increasing the population there. Just make sure you do that last piece. So we have some of these things are more period 5, like Enlightenment does start in period 4 though, but it's more studied in period 5. Triangle trade, yep, so like slavery, European exploration, silver trade, imperialism. Okay. Is the Columbian Exchange and the Atlantic slave trade the same thing? So it's like squares and rectangles. So the Atlantic slave trade was part of the Columbian Exchange. The Columbian Exchange is sort of your like umbrella event of the connection of, like the world. But the exchange, the actual like Atlantic slave trade just refers to the little movement of slaves. Just like triangle trade is just like one thing that's happening within the Columbian Exchange. Okay, give me period 5. So 1750 to 1900. What are the huge events? Give me your top 10 that like this is going to come up. Industrialization, imperialism, revolutions, enlightenment, reforms. The other one that you could bring up is migrations, feminism. Yeah, man, all of these. And some of the ones you have there are even more specific, right? Like Opium Wars or the Taiping Rebellion. Those are like specific examples of like resistance to imperialism. And so period 5 is actually really easy because there's 4 key concepts and they basically label the 4 major things. You have industrialization, imperialism, revolutions, and migrations. And that's sort of your 4 big, huge things. So whatever the prompt is, if it's in the time period 5, more likely than not, one of those 4 things are going to be in your context. Just figure out a way to connect them to the prompt. All right, and then period 6, so 1900 to the present, give me the 20th century, huge, big events, decolonization, global wars, Cold War, right? So like within the Cold War, you have a lot of pieces, but the Cold War is a huge event that will, most likely be part of it. Or decolonization, and you could talk about India or Israel or, Algeria or any of these places. Green Revolution, rise of technology, right? So there's an entire key concept about technology for 6.1. You guys are killing it right now. So this is perfect. So this is exactly how you get context, is you have to think about what is going on in the world, what just happened, or what's happening right now, right? And like, what is that big umbrella event that is really shaping everything that's happening? And I can connect it to this prompt because it's clearly relevant, right? Like if I'm writing about women after World War II, clearly World War II affected the rise of feminism because of new job opportunities, things like that. Try to write like 3 to 5 sentences. I would shoot for like good solid 4 sentences where you kind of lead it up, like what's happening, explain one of these big events, and then take another sentence or 2 specifically connecting that to the prompt. Okay, so how do we feel about context now? Any other questions about context? Can we do an example? Yeah, so much better. Yeah. I think context is honestly one of the easiest points to get on the DBQ and on the LEQ. Because there's like, if you really think of it like we just did, if you go through, like I would literally do this tonight or tomorrow, take a piece of paper, draw yourself a box for each time period, and think of 10 or 15 massive events that happened in that time period. And if you can just, you got to know those anyways for the test, and you should know those. And so you just got to know a little bit about those things, and you're going to be able to get context. So an example of context would be, for example, this just really shows that, like, that connection. So this prompt from last year, this is kind of just talking about many important changes taking place in Afro-Eurasia. This was a time of great technological discovery, such as the telegraph as well. This was the time of industrialization. See, there you go, industrialization, where companies started to grow, and ideas about nationalism and enlightenment and imperialism. So they're just kind of listing there. But what really gets them the point is this sentence right here. Alongside the telegraph, which they had just mentioned as being a thing that's happening, was another invention that was starting to shape the face of the world as we knew it, railroads. And then they literally take the topic of the DBQ and they put it right in there. So as the reader knows, this student knows what's going on in the world and knows how it relates to railroads. They have successfully set up contextualization, and they will get that point. So that's what that looks like. Dope. Okay, so if you, let's see. Should we write unneat so the grader skips over misspellings? No, write as neat as you can so that the grader can give you points for everything that you do correctly. No matter what point we're talking about, the readers are trying to give you points. It really is like a scavenger hunt for them. I read the LEQ a couple years ago. I read 1,200 essays in 1 week, and it's literally like, it was so exciting when you would read something and it would be like beautiful, and so you are trying to find the points that you want to give these points. And it's so frustrating when a student gets so close and just, I can't infer, right? I might know what you're trying to say, but if it doesn't actually say it here, then I can't give you the point, right? We're really bound by that. So an example of something getting really close would be this context here. If they don't have that last sentence, they're not going to get context because they don't actually set up the connection between context and the prompt. This is what really gives them the point, right? It's establishing relevance. So if I read these first 3 sentences, I know that this student is fully aware that industrialization includes railroads. And they told it to me. They told me industrialization. They're right. It's all right there. And I know that they knew that last bit, but if they didn't write it, can't give them a point. And then the reader is sad because the reader wants to give you the point. What if the reader can understand my handwriting because it's messy? If your handwriting is messy, the readers are really good at deciphering things, and they'll literally take it to different people. Like if I couldn't read something, I would go to the person next to me to see if we could figure it out. If we can't figure it out, we go to someone else. There's a whole chain of command. And so they literally, like, if it only, like, if it's really, really bad, will the person at the way, way top finally just be like, I can't make this out. But I think that's only happened like a handful of times in all of AP world history. And so just try to write neat, like I said, we want to give you credit for things. Also, keep in mind here, how you see how this student crossed something out. If it's crossed out, they can't give you a point for it. So if you cross something out that was correct, you can't earn the point. However, if you write it and it's wrong, it's just ignored. So your best bet is don't cross things out. Just keep it there, keep it on there. I mean, this was obviously just kind of like grammatical, but it doesn't matter. Just keep it, I wouldn't cross things out, especially like terms that could be evidence. Maybe you're not sure if it's the right time period. You write it down and then you're second guessing yourself. Don't cross it out. Just keep it. Keep that evidence sentence there. Maybe it will work. Let the readers decide if it is good enough or not, rather than you trying to figure out and then crossing things out. All right, so let's move on from contextualization. Let's talk about evidence from the documents. Okay, so there's a lot of question here about evidence from the documents. Would you get points off for complexity? So you never lose points. You start the test at 0 and you are just gaining points. And so you never lose anything. So if you do complexity and it's wrong, you just don't earn the point. It's possible that what you wrote might actually be really good for outside evidence and you just sort of missed the relevance piece there. So just leave it, but like if it's wrong, you don't lose. All right. Okay, that one's later. Okay, so interpreting the documents and picking out the good information. This is a really good question. Just remember that you should never, ever, ever quote. Do not quote the documents. It's a huge waste of your time, and it doesn't give you anything, right? Even if you quote the document, you're not getting any points for doing that because you have not actually done anything. All you did was copy something. So don't quote anything unless you're literally quoting like a one-word phrase that is just like perfect. That's it, right? So limit yourself. In terms of interpreting the documents, you want to think about this should happen in the first few minutes. So you want to really think about what in this document will support what I'm trying to say. What is it that this document is doing? What is it saying? Honestly, I think that the first evidence sentence, so there's 2 points that you can earn from the documents. They're different. So I want to just show you that first point is just connecting the content to at least of 3 of the documents to the prompt. And so that one is sort of straightforward because it's just saying like some kind of summary of the document and showing how that connects to your argument. You can do that in one sentence. And so if you do that correctly 3 different times for 3 documents, that's a point. The harder part is then going beyond that. And so actually supporting your argument with the documents rather than just kind of summarizing. Let's see. Let me stop answering this one. Sourcing is definitely where most of the questions are. Yeah, so actually bucketing of the documents. The first thing that you should do when you're looking at the documents the first time is make a quick list just on some, on the documents or just on a piece of paper that you have. Make a list 1 through 7. As you're going through the documents, think about like, what is this document arguing that I could use, right? So, for example, you can even do this in the most basic sense using SPICE. So, this document is clearly a political argument. This one is an economic argument. This one is a cultural argument, right? You can sort of see how they're different based on those things. You could bucket them based on time. Maybe there's some written before an event, some during, some after. You could bucket them based on place. Maybe you're going to argue that railroads greatly affected empire building, and you're going to show Asia versus, Europe or whatever. And you could then bucket the documents based on place. You could bucket them based on people who are writing them, right? These could be from like government officials. These could be from historians. These could be from, I don't know, some sort of propaganda, something like that. Okay, so I want to show you an example of this. So we have This is what evidence from the documents looks like. To begin, railroads drastically altered the process of empire building. Okay, so in Afro-Eurasia economically. So you see how like their grouping was clearly the economic argument, right? So she's saying it did affect the process and it did so through an economic lens. And as she was going through the documents, she took note of which documents could have an economic argument. The economy and building a strong economy are majorly important factors to consider when building an empire, and railroads help facilitate this economic growth in new ways. That sentence is kind of a throwaway sentence, doesn't really say anything. You could have just skipped that. A good example of this is what this author, I don't know what it is, says in his memorandum to the Qing court in 1867. Right there, if you just put in parentheses 2, like this person said from document 2, extra words, you can just cite it in just the number 2. Here he explains, so notice that it's like a good example of this is this document. Okay, they haven't actually said anything from it yet, right? Then he explains that railroads are a huge process to build, ones that would be extremely beneficial in creating jobs for the poor. Okay, right there is where they have now given content from it that's connected to their argument. That would have earned them the first document, evidence from the documents point. Before this, poor people had trouble finding work, but because of railroads, many jobs opened up. That is what is now going beyond that. So this is what that looks like. Evidence from the documents. All right, let me ask you, so you guys are just talking about quoting. Don't quote, no quotes. I know you might be used to it in an English essay, and that, I mean, like normally you might include quotes and things, but honestly, for the most part, you shouldn't really be using quotes anyways. So just skip it. It's just a waste of your time. You just don't need to do it. So like you're in a time crunch. You don't need to do it. You can just explain the document rather than quoting it. All right. Okay, give me a number 0, 1, or 2 about how you feel about actually using evidence from the documents. Let's see how we are. Ones and 2s, y'all. That's not bad. Did that paragraph get the point? Yes. It got got a little tick mark towards the point. So remember, you have to have this student would have had to have done this for 3 documents in order to get at least one of the evidence points. So, here, so basically what happens is they have a little chart that says like 1 through 6 or 1 through 7 for 7 documents. And if I'm reading the DBQ, I'm looking for each document so I can just count them up. And so I see this one and I'm like, this is good. I'm going to check it off for counting towards both of the evidence points as a 1 and a 2. And because it would have gone towards the second evidence point as well. And so now they've used document 2. Now I'm looking in this essay for, use of evidence from at least 2 more documents, hopefully 5 more documents. Okay, so some questions here. What if the documents don't support the argument? So you need to make sure that you're making an argument that is supported by the documents. So don't argue something that you can't use the documents for, because you're not going to get most of these points. So even if you don't agree with what you're arguing, if it's a really straightforward argument because you have these documents set up for you, then just argue that. And then the other piece, like Jillian just says, the counter argument. So the document itself could actually prove you wrong or be the opposite of what you're saying. Use it to however, this thing was also happening, but it was more relevant over here. Can you include a counter argument paragraph and get points? Yes. So when we talk about complexity in a few minutes, you're going to want to use a counter argument to get your complexity point, which is why you want you want to have a counter argument in your thesis. However, blank. You also want to weave it into every single paragraph. Whether if you're arguing economic, you can still say, maybe you give a reason why there was other things that increased economic productivity in this time period, more so than railroads. Add that in one sentence. And then I would put your third body paragraph as a counter argument. And that will then show, like, complexity you have to have throughout. It's not a one-time thing. So if you have it in your thesis and then you have it woven into each body paragraph and a full body paragraph of counter argument, you're in a good spot. Would you get evidence from docs too? Yeah. So, like, ideally, you can use 2 of the documents to support a counter argument. Put them in that last body paragraph, and that will help you earn that point. Can the counter argument also be somewhat placed towards the end? So if you have not talked about counter argument at all, and then you have a paragraph for it, you could get evidence points in that paragraph. You could get sourcing points in that paragraph. You could even get analysis, but you're probably not going to get complexity, because complexity has to be throughout. It's not something you can just throw in at the end. So if you are not writing a complex argument from the jump, then you're not going to get that point. That point is supposed to be the hardest. It is a very high bar. So they are not going to, like, bend the rules for you. Even if you have a really dope paragraph at the end, it's got to be throughout. So just make sure that you, like, weave it in. What if it's in the thesis and last body and not in the other bodies? It depends on how good it is there. I would say complexity equals counter arguments everywhere, but counter arguments everywhere that are supporting you, that are showing, like, wow, this student is really thinking beyond just the basics of this question. In the paragraph about political, impacts of railroads, they also included some of the, even, like, beyond that, the railroad strikes that happened that really limited how fast the railroads could be built in the US, right? Or it led to, because the railroads were so important, it also created these monopolies of, railroad companies that profited off of creating these railroads. Like, something like that is, like, going beyond. It is part of the, like, beyond the documents, but it's really showing a very complex argument. And that is what they're looking for. Okay. All right. So I think we've got evidence from the documents down as best as we can. Now, let me know how we're doing in the chat about evidence beyond the documents. How do you get that outside evidence point? Struggle City. Okay. I get it. Zeros. Just because I blank. All right. So the way you have to get the outside evidence point is very similar to how I just explained the counter argument. Think about something within each of your paragraphs that you could bring up as another example of what you're arguing or against what you're arguing, and use it as, like, there could have been a document about this, right? There could have been an entire document about it, but there wasn't, right? So you have to do this correctly once in your essay. You have to describe one piece of evidence not in the documents that is also different than your context. And so I would try this 3 times. Do it once in each body paragraph, so that if you don't get it right on the first shot or even the second shot, you got 3 chances to get it right. Right? So do more so that you have more chances. This is how it would look. Evidence beyond the documents. Okay, so if we go through this, the construction of these railways aids in the spread of communication and allows for pilgrimage to be taken for religious purposes. For example, the railways connecting to Mecca, document 3. All right, so now they're earning that point. Connecting to Mecca allow for Islamic peoples to reach Mecca, which has to be achieved because pilgrimage to Mecca is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, along with fasting during Ramadan, praying 5 times a day, and others, therefore making railways a necessary investment in the plans of empire building. There is no document in this DBQ about the 5 pillars of Islam. There is a document about the railways helping spread Islam because it helped connect people to Mecca so they could make their pilgrimage easier. And so this student says, I know that to the religion of Islam, that pilgrimage is one of the 5 pillars. And so by saying that, they're giving evidence beyond it, right? There could have been a document that was talking about the 5 pillars of Islam, and you could have had to make that connection. But there wasn't, and so they scooped this up. Are the rest of the 4 pillars of Islam even necessary to the argument? No, you wouldn't even need the rest of them. The fact that this student only had to say there were 5 pillars of Islam, making that pilgrimage is one of them, therefore this is why it was such an important piece of empire building in the Islamic world. I'm going to answer some of these questions here. Wasn't that before the time period of the railroads? Yeah, but it was still existing during the railroads and was affected by them, right? It's relevant. So the 5 pillars is just the foundational, tenets of Islam. And so Islam is created in the 600s, but Muslims today still use the 5 pillars to that's what the entire religion is really based off of. Or at least traditions for it. And so, let's see. So I'm stressing about getting the evidence when I don't, outside evidence when I get a topic that I know nothing about. So, I mean, straight up, you got to know stuff about the topics to get, to do well on this. So I would try to remedy that with going through top 10 to study, figure out what are the top 10 things. And then what you could do as you are making that sheet to sort of practice, I would then even make tiny little mind maps on there. So you might have industrialization and then connect a couple of keywords about industrialization. You might have imperialism, connect a couple of keywords about imperialism. You should be able to rattle off some really fast things. Hit me right now in the chat. What are some things that you can connect to imperialism? Some other not a country. Give me an event, a specific event, or a person or a concept. Okay, Berlin Conference is perfect. Opium Wars, White Man's Burden is great, right? Leopold II. These are just specific people, places, things or events that are happening. Sepoy Rebellion, social Darwinism. Right. This is perfect, right? So this is how you do it. If the whole DBQ is going to fit into some larger topic, you are going to put it in your context. If you can think of these other types of things, if you're writing a paragraph about how railroads supported the economic, globalization of the world, then you're trying to think of okay, well, what are some other economic things that may have happened? And just like what you just did in the chat, right? Let's do another one. Let's do, trying to think of some, let's do some period. Let's do a period 3 one. Give me as many key terms as you can think of that connect with Indian Ocean trade. Dhows, lateen sail, junks, monsoons, Vasco da Gama. You guys are killing it. Compass, bulk goods. Yeah, this is perfect, right? So this is where just knowing key terms is everything. And these exact same key terms are going to get you evidence points in the LEQ. This is what gives you those points. It's those little pieces, If you're looking at the chat right now and you're like, how the heck am I going to learn all this by Thursday? Take a deep breath. You're not going to memorize every single thing by Thursday. So you're going to try to get as close as you can, right? So really take a, like, I'm not kidding you. If you're looking at this chat and you're like, how the heck am I going to do this? I feel like all these people know more than I do. You need to take a piece of paper tonight and you need to split it into 6 sections and write down the top 10 events for each time period. Big picture events. Pretty much the titles of your textbook chapters, you know, or like the titles of the headings. Like they're really, really big things. And then find 5 terms that connect to each of them. If you do that, now you have 10 times 6 times 5 is a lot. And then make a little Quizlet deck, you know, 10 times 6 times 5. It's 300 terms that you would know. What should we memorize the second before we enter the exam room? Nothing. Keep it in your brain, you know? Once you go into the exam room, I would just remember the like outline of the test or something. For the DBQ and LEQ, do they only use big concepts? I mean, everything is related to those big concepts. The DBQ could be on an entirely random event. There was a whole DBQ a few years ago on the, you clicked on answering. There was a whole DBQ on the Olympics. There was one on the reactions to the Spanish flu that happened after World War I. There was one about cricket and Muslim nationalism. There was one about like wealth and religion. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's likely that you open it up and you're like, what the heck? I studied these massive events because Amanda from Fiveable told me to, and now this is like so specific, and I don't even know what this event is. That's when you just like take a deep breath, because what they're doing, they're going to give you all the information you need to know about that specific topic in the documents. As long as you can see the years that you're in, which will be in the prompt, there'll be a year. You know, it'll say between these times or in this century. And then you're going to think back to those top 10 things that you did, right? You're doing 6 different, time periods, top 10 events. Then you're going to try to think, okay, what are the top 10 events that happened in that time period? And that's what you're really writing your essay about. Like, someone said, college board is a cult and they hate kids. I don't know if that's true, but yeah. So we do not have to do HIP. Okay, so hopefully that was super helpful. And now you have a strategy to study this. I'm going to go into HIP right now. You have a strategy to study this week, to do some last minute studying. Gather up your top 10s, gather up your like little keywords that attach to that. Tweet us a picture of what you do, because I would really love to see what you create, and we'll blast it out so other people have it too. I think these will be really, really helpful for you just in this very last week when you're just trying to like organize it all, remember it all. All right, HIP, sourcing. Tell me in the chat how you feel about sourcing. 0, 1, 2. Yeah, not so great. Most are not so good. Sourcing, question mark? Same. Okay, so the point of sourcing is that all of the documents are like, people have bias in the time period I'm living in as a woman, as a woman of color, as an entrepreneur, as a Jewish woman, as a 29-year-old, as a teacher, as I have bias because of those things, just like you do as well, because you are a student, of your age, in the region that you live, in the school that you're at, the type of student you are, your race, your religion, your ethnicity, your gender, the jobs that your parents have, I'm thinking of like all these different things, the class that you are, like, you have bias because of all those different things. They're part of your identity. It's not a bad thing. It's just like part of what makes your opinions like make sense, And so like I can understand more about you and what you think and how you think and why you think those things because of like who you are. You're doing the same thing for the documents, right? So what you have to do for the documents is, for 3 of the documents, you have to correctly explain one of these things. Then they're giving you options where you're basically saying, like, this author would have said this because of blank, or in this time, it makes sense that this argument would have been posed because of blank. So let me show you like a couple of just quick examples. So they give you options here. You have to, it's 4 documents you have to do this correctly for. So you should do it for all of them because it's hard and you may not get it correct every time. And so you got to do it correctly 4 times, but you can do any combination of these. So you could do historical context for all 7 documents and get the point because you did it right 4 times. You could do some context, some purpose, some POV, some audience. It doesn't matter the combination. But let's just run through this really quick. So I want you to think about maybe even like, all right, so just from a like really basic standpoint. So if we look at like Fiveable Instagram, the last thing that we just posted, or if we go like this, we posted like a AP student starter pack. Okay, so if we run through this, what is the context for this post on Instagram? Well, it was posted, during the first week of AP exams. And so as a business supporting APs, they would have wanted to, create content that AP students would think was funny. There would be context. Audience. Okay, so obviously the AP student starter pack is geared towards students, right? So, Fiveable created the AP student starter pack for AP students so that they could, relate to Fiveable content and then go to the Fiveable website to see what else there was. Yeah. Or like, right. So, you might have, maybe they're specifically trying to reach procrastinators so that they come to the CRAM sessions. And that would be that would be the purpose, right? So the intended audience are that the people who are going to look at this are students or possibly procrastinators because they're on Instagram, right? They're not necessarily studying. And that would be the audience of it. The purpose would be, Fiveable posted this because they want to entice more students to come to CRAM sessions. Something like that, right? So that would be the purpose of it. The author's point of view, well, this was created by Claire. And maybe you could write like, you have, I mean, I'm not necessarily like calling you out. This is how this works, right? Like, why do we post things on Instagram? Why does Fiveable have an Instagram? Because students are on Instagram and it's a fun way to connect, right? I know that you're there. And so I want you to be scrolling and learning sometimes, right? Or to see something funny and then relate it to Instagram, related to Fiveable, right? So in terms of like author's point of view, right? It's like the teachers of Fiveable created this because they've seen so many students, in their experience of students stressing before the exams. These are the main main resources that we know students use. So they included those logos on the starter pack. So here's the beauty of this. You only have to do one of the hip things for any document. I just did all 4 for one document. And some of them seem like a little bit of a stretch, but none of them are too difficult. So if you think about, I don't know if that was helpful. Was running through Instagram helpful as an example? Because honestly, just think of all the documents as Instagram posts. Some of them would be terrible posts, because they're just text and they're boring. But think of it the same way. If this was being imagine that the author of that document was the person's, it was their Instagram account and they posted it. Why would they have posted this? What did they want? What was the context of that time? Yes, I can show you an example. So here's an example of this. Because the Ottoman Sultan had to approve the proposals mentioned in document 3, the report attempts to flatter the Sultan by emphasizing his supposed popularity among Muslims across the world and how the construction of a railroad from Damascus to Mecca would only increase that popularity. This is a very sophisticated sourcing. So again, if you're reading this and you're like, I don't write like that, it's okay. This is a really, really good one. But this is what it does really right here in the middle. The report attempts, that's purpose, right? Attempts to flatter the Sultan by emphasizing his supposed popularity. So they're writing this document in order to flatter the Sultan because they are emphasizing how popular he is and how popular he could be because of if he had built these railroads. You know, that's what it looks like. So if you're going to do point of view, you would think of point of view as like, let me use a different example. I'll use a different, trying to think of like an example. So a point of view would just be, why does the person think what they're thinking? So if you think about like the video that I post on our YouTube channel of like me talking to Trevor Packer when the exam got shifted and changed. So I'll use that as an example document. So I spoke at an open mic and I told Trevor Packer how just like messed up it is they were cutting the course. Okay, so what was my point of view? My point of view is that a couple things. I am a woman of color. Therefore, I would be personally offended by cutting my own history from this course. I taught in Oakland, and most of my students were students of color. Therefore, I wanted to advocate for my students, right? That's my point of view in giving that speech. My purpose was to save the first half of the course to make sure that the curriculum included all of it. My audience was Trevor Packer, but also the people who were watching it. I knew that there was a whole room of people. I knew it would be on YouTube. And so I'm thinking not only about the person I'm talking to, but anyone who could be watching it too. And then the context is that the College Board had just cut the curriculum and just announced that. Hopefully that's helpful. Okay, how do we feel about sourcing now? Do you feel better? We have one more. Better. Okay, so one of these hip points is always like easier than another. It depends on the document though. Personally, I think purpose is generally pretty easy depending on the document, but purpose is just like, why? What did they want? Somebody put this together. What do they want to happen because of it? I think that can be kind of easy to figure out. I think author's point of view could be difficult depending on who wrote it. There's some people who, like if the person who wrote it is poor or a woman, you can generally like just tie one of those things to their point of view. But just make sure that you not only say that like that because this person is a woman, they would have thought that thing. But like why? Like you have to make sure to explain that. You can't just say because they're a woman, they would have thought this. Like because they're a woman, they would have had, they experience not having equal rights. They experience not being paid the same amount at work, things like that. They experience not having the right to vote, like whatever it is that you want to say about them being a woman. Okay, let's get into complexity. Complexity is the hardest point, all right? So this question of like, what is the best way to get the complexity point? Is it worth focusing on? I'm going to give you the best strategy, and my answer to that is you should try for all of the points. Don't just decide that this one is too hard. I'm going to just go for these 3. Go for all of them, and you'll have a better shot at getting more, right? So the best way I think of getting complexity is with the counterargument, because essentially what you have to say is Just think of it as like the opposite. So if you're going to argue that something changed more than it stayed the same, then you should include some of the ways that it did stay the same. If you're going to argue that two things were more similar than they were different, then you need to also argue how they were also different. And so you can really, so like if it's compare contrast, you're just doing the opposite, right? So you're going to argue that something was more of something else, right? And so your counter argument is just the opposite, however. So if the question is around like evaluate the similarities between revolutions in, I don't know, America and Haiti, this is not going to be your question. But if that was the question, then, and you're going to say like the revolutions in America and Haiti were mostly similar because, X and Y. However, they were different because in America, blank, while in Haiti, blank. Yeah, I mean, I totally understand why teachers are kind of saying, forget complexity. If you get a 6 on the DBQ, you can still get a 5, so who cares? I totally get that, but I think it's worth going for. Like, when you really just think of it as a counter argument, it gets a lot easier. It's worth it to try it. And it gives you another body paragraph that's a lot easier because your third body paragraph is just about the opposite. And so, instead of just sort of giving up on it, you may as well do it. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go through some of these questions. I'll stay for a little bit longer and answer these questions. That's essentially that's the DBQ. So just really quick, this is how you should write it. Your intro paragraph is context and thesis. Then you have a body paragraph about one of your arguments. The French and the American Revolution were similar in that blank and blank. However, blank. Then you have, so like, look, this positive and negative, the impact of, I don't know, the impact of imperialism was like mostly, this is like a horrible one. I don't know. So like if you say like the impact of like of the Columbian Exchange was mostly positive because it led to, more crops around the world, or because it, increased food production and led to like, new innovation or like more trade. However, it also connected the diseases of the world, which devastated populations in the Americas. So that would be like your thesis. Then let's say your first paragraph would be about crops, right? So you have, there is a lot of crops that were being shared around the world. Here's this document that talks about these crops, this document that talks about these crops. And, here's some outside evidence, might be like, I don't know, about champa rice or like some crop that's not mentioned, something that was traded that wasn't mentioned. And then however, even though the crops did increase the population of Afro-Eurasia, the Americas really suffered because of the diseases. Like the new crops weren't able to increase the population. And then maybe your next paragraph is about, I don't know, like trade of ideas. So like the spread of ideas led to the spread of Christianity. It also led to it ended up leading to the rise of like the Enlightenment. Maybe you have those two things. There were documents about them. However, these new ideas were not able to include native traditions because many of the natives did not survive the spread of diseases. Something like that. And then your last paragraph could just be like, maybe there was 2 documents about the actual like decimation of native tribes. You bring in those 2 documents, and now you're clearly showing that like yes, the Columbian Exchange was awesome. It was one of the most important things that happened. That's your argument throughout. However, like, you very much are clear that there were negative impacts throughout. So that's how your essay will look. Someone asked, do I even have to worry about the conclusion? I want to click. If your thesis is in the intro, do you really need a conclusion? The only thing that your conclusion should have is restate the thesis. It's worth it because you may have killed it. You had a thesis in the intro and you did a really good job and it's there and you're going to earn that point, but you may not have. Like, you've now written plenty of essays in your lifetime. How many times do you sit down and go to write an essay and you have no idea what you want to say? And then you've written through the whole draft and now you are really clear on your argument, And so, like, the actual process of doing that will happen in your DBQ. No matter how strong you think you are at the beginning, by the end, you're really clear on what you're arguing. So rewrite it. Just write the thesis statement in a different way. Just try to make it better than you did before. Even if the first one was actually awesome, you may as well just write it again, just in case. Do we have to synthesize, or is that the same? So synthesis is a way that you can get the complexity point. I don't want to, like, totally confuse you. Like, I'm really pushing for you to do the counter argument because I think that's the easiest way to do it. Another way you could do it is by thinking about synthesis, which is basically like weaving in how that argument, the increased trade, spread crops, how that also happened in a different time period. This wasn't the first time in history that, like, an increase in crops also increased the population. Like, after the first agricultural revolution, farming dramatically increased the number of crops, which increased the population. You could include, like, a totally, like, separate piece there that's, like, in a different time period or in a different place. Even though the spread of diseases, like, this isn't the first time in history that disease decimated a population of people. And then you could talk about, like, Black Plague or, the Mongols spreading disease in the post-classical era. When you do synthesis, does it have to be from a later? Synthesis can be early or late. It can even be in the same time period as long as it's a different place. So if you're making an argument about disease spreading in the Americas, you could make the same argument about disease spreading in Europe. You could then say, it didn't decimate the populations of Europe, but, like, the rise of syphilis greatly affected a lot of people in Europe because of the Columbian Exchange. All right. So this question, how can you 100% sure know that you're understanding the documents correctly and how they relate to the prompt? You can't. I mean, like, straight up, like, you should be confident about what you're doing, as long as you are answering the question and you're posing an argument. This was positive, this was negative, this greatly affected it, this greatly caused it, this is very similar, it's very different. As long as you're arguing something, chances are you're going to be fine, because ultimately it's your ability to prove why your argument makes sense. Are you going to be 100% sure that you're arguing the right thing? You might not be. You might read through it and you might be like, okay, I have a really good idea for this, but I'm not 100% sure that this is going to work. Your best bet is to just dive all the way in. Just do it. And just give yourself as much confidence as you humanly can that you are going to write the correct thing, that you're not going to mess this up. Exactly. YOLO. It's all the same thing with, like, anything you do, like, even in, like, Fiveable. Like, do I ever know 100% that something that I do with Fiveable is going to work, is going to be something that students like, is going to look good on our website, on our app? No. I've never done it before. I don't know 100%. And so I try to pull in as much information as I can, and I go with what I think is the best, and then I go 100% into it. And if I was wrong, I'm wrong, and then you adjust. And so like, I'm going to end this with just sort of a little bit of another, I feel like every night this week, I'm just doing more and more pep talks. Some of you guys asked, like, what happens if I fail, right? The real question to that is nothing. Nothing happens if you fail. So you have a 1 on your, little transcript that might go to a college. Colleges are going to be really impressed that you took this class, and for many of you, this is probably your first AP, or most of you guys in 10th grade, sophomores. Just taking this class is huge. 9th grade, it's very, very impressive that you are doing it, that you're doing this class. And colleges really do believe that. Just like your teachers believe that, you should believe that no matter what your score is, the fact that you are taking this class actually makes you more likely to take other APs, to get scholarships, to get into a four-year college, to graduate in 4 years. Like, all of those things are true, no matter what your score is. Like, I promise you, I'm like 15 years ahead of you, okay? I'm literally you, so that I didn't take AP classes. I took AP Psych, and that was it. And I promise you, I don't know anybody that is totally changed their, trajectory in life because an AP score didn't turn out the way they wanted it to. I promise you. It is a cherry on top to get the college credit. But if worst case scenario, you sit down on the test, you forget everything, and you're just like, I'm about to do a lot of guessing right now. You're going to go 100% in on the guessing and then leave it all on the table. And so you get a 1. There's no reason for you to cancel the score. There just isn't. It is better for you to show the college that you tried. You did your best. What they're going to care more about is your grades in your class. So, do the colleges know if you fail, if you don't send them scores? I have no idea. I wouldn't recommend canceling the score, because you're not failing. Like, if you get a 1, you will learn something from that experience, and you will do better next time. Because a lot of this stuff is not about the content. Like, yes, you have to know the history to pass. Yes, you have to know these rubrics to pass. But at the end of the day, like, how you become a really good student has a lot more to do with how you study, how you approach, time management and organization. The fact that you're showing up here on a Sunday night, before Game of Thrones, and we're jamming out about the DBQ says a whole lot about every single one of you as a student. And that is something that you should be incredibly proud of, that no matter what happens on Thursday, you learned a lot, and all these things are going to affect you for the good, right? It's all going to help you out. So, you're going to feel so elated once this is over on Thursday. Like, I can't even tell you how much fun that feeling is. I hope you go straight into A push next year. Even if you get a 1, so what? So what? It's okay. It doesn't matter. I want to help you pass, because I think it's awesome to get the college credit. Like, it's just a cherry on top. But no matter what, you are in a good spot. You are better off than a lot of students. I know that it's actually only like 20% of high school students take AP classes. So even if you feel like everyone at your high school does, maybe at your school, but overall, 20% of high school students in the US take AP classes. So that puts you ahead of 80% of high school students in America, because you put yourself in this challenge and you will be better for it. Yeah, so even if at your school, it's even like 100% of your school, that's a outlier. You are in a good spot. You are going to be okay. Like, no matter what, you're going to be okay. And yes, so I told some of you guys this last night, but some of what Fiveable is doing this summer and next year, we are going to have way more teachers streaming so that you can really like jump into any topic, anytime, not worried about time zones, not always learning from the same teacher, different ways to approach things. So we'll hopefully have all the AP subjects next year and several different ways to learn from them, which is awesome. And you can self-study for them. So like so someone just said, I want AP Euro at my school. Maybe you're taking APUSH next year, but the year after that, you can take AP Euro. And you don't have to have the class at your school. In fact, at that point, it should be a pretty easy class to self-study for because you've already done World and US. The tests are the exact same. And then you just have to then really kind of focus on the Euro side of things, which you'll already know a bunch of them. So how you self-study, one of the things that I'm going to do at Fiveable is help you sign up for the exams, try to like link people up better. But self-studying just means that you just literally study on your own and you aren't taking the class, and then you take the test in May. You can do any of those. You can take any of the tests. You don't have to take the class. I wish I knew that. I tried to take AP US history in high school and I wasn't allowed in because I had an 88 average the year before. I literally didn't get to take AP US history. And so again, my life is no different because I didn't, but I wish I did because I had to take those classes in college and I could have saved me some time. So I could have just self-studied for it. Who knows if I would have done well, but I could have self-studied for it. The other thing that we're going to do over the summer is Camp Fiveable, which is going to be dope. And it's going to include lots of other, some things that are related to your AP classes, some things that are not, that are just like, you guys want to learn more about the medical field. You want to learn more about what we do in startups, sex ed. I mean, honestly, how many students would come to sex ed live? I mean, for real, we get like a amazing expert to stream out and really like get in to answer all your questions, do whatever you need to do. And I think it'd be great. My parents walk in. I mean, it's just like, if your schools aren't teaching it, that's a problem. And like, we can live stream pretty amazing experts, and it would be really great. Okay, so here's the thing. I'm going to go play a mini game of fives. I'm just going to put in some questions, maybe from period 4 or something, and we're going to play that. You guys got this. You can join just by, I'm going to create I didn't even create the event yet. I'm going to create the event in a second, so you'll see it. If you refresh, you'll see it under review, or you can just download the app so you can play. Tomorrow is at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can right now go on and like save your spot just so we have like a count. And yeah, so I'm going to play mini game of fives in 10 minutes. We're going to play another mini game of fives tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, I think 10 p.m. Eastern, whatever after Game of Thrones is. And that's it, y'all. You got this. You're all in great spots, honestly. Don't even be worried about this. So take a break, come play Game of Fives with me, and then please let me know how the experience was. Were we able to, Madeline, you need to feel better. Go drink some water and go to bed early. Let me know if you have any feedback, but for better or worse, about what playing the game is like. Dope. See you guys later. Tomorrow night, we're talking about, tomorrow night I'm actually doing a 2-hour review after trivia, going through all of the content. And then we have LEQs and last minute questions throughout this week as well. Woo! All right. Yeah, tomorrow night we're going through everything with like possible questions from each time period, the big changes, the big continuities, the really big ideas. No, I have not graded your SAQs. I should have done it this morning. Didn't get to it. Yeah. The big trivia game is tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm just going to play a mini one in 9 minutes just to test it out, just to give teachers a chance to kind of play. All right, y'all. See you later. Bye.